You're taking medication, I know, maybe 1 pill, maybe 3 pills a day, and yet your blood pressure is still high. Not because the drugs are weak, but because every single day you are repeating 6 behaviors that quietly push your blood pressure beyond what medication can control. I'll be direct, if you only look at the blood pressure number and keep increasing medication, you are missing the real cause. Blood pressure doesn't rise on its own, it is being continuously triggered by what you do every day. The third habit is checking your blood pressure too often. Every time you prepare to measure it, your body reacts before the cuff even inflates. Stress circuits in the brain activate, the sympathetic nervous system turns on, blood vessels constrict. You are no longer measuring blood pressure, you are creating it. Repeating this many times a day trains your body to live in chronic stress. The second habit is drinking coffee at the wrong time. Coffee is not harmless for blood pressure, blocks your body's natural vessel relaxing mechanisms and raises pressure by 10-15 mmHg for several hours. If you measure blood pressure after coffee, or take blood pressure medication with coffee, you are measuring and treating caffeine pharmacology, not your true baseline pressure. The third habit is hidden sodium from processed foods. Not using a salt shaker does not mean you eat low sodium. Bread, deli meats, cheese, canned soup, restaurant meals, all loaded with sodium. Sodium pulls water into the bloodstream, increasing blood volume. More volume in the same vessels means higher pressure. Medication cannot override basic physics. The fourth habit is daily alcohol, even one drink. At first, vessels relax. Hours later, the body rebounds with stronger constriction. Blood pressure rises above baseline. If you drink every day, you live in a state of constant rebound hypertension, most noticeable in the morning. The fifth habit is daily exposure to stressful news. Your brain does not distinguish news from real danger. Each exposure raises cortisol, increases vascular sensitivity, and causes sodium retention. Blood pressure rises 8-12 mmHg within minutes. Repeated daily blood vessels remodel to maintain that higher pressure. The sixth habit is eating too fast and not chewing enough. When you rush meals, the parasympathetic system never activates. Instead, rapid stomach distension triggers sympathetic responses. Every meal becomes a blood pressure spike. 3 meals a day, every day, your vessels never get an A. These 6 habits act independently but add up. Each raises pressure by several points. Together, they can drive blood pressure up 25-50 mmHg even on multiple medications. Remove them and the medication finally works. This is not lifestyle advice, this is cardiovascular physiology. If behavior doesn't change, medication will keep losing. If you change the right behaviors, blood pressure falls within weeks, not years. In the previous part, I made one thing clear. The medication is not weak. What is destroying your blood pressure control is what you repeat every day. And the third habit I have to confront directly is checking your blood pressure too often. You think you're monitoring your health. In reality, the moment you kick the cuff, your body reacts before the numbers even appear. You don't need to feel consciously anxious. Your brain still recognizes this as a stress event. The stress response activates instantly. As soon as you prepare to measure, the hypothalamus activates the HPA axis. The pituitary releases HETH. Cortisol begins to rise. At the same time, the brainstem increases norepinephrine release and the sympathetic nervous system switches on. Blood vessels constrict. Heart rate rises. Blood pressure increases by 8-15 mmHg within 60 seconds. Before the measurement finishes, your pressure is already higher than baseline. You are not measuring blood pressure, you are creating blood pressure. Robert, 6'8", checked his blood pressure 6 to 8 times a day for 3 years. Morning, noon, afternoon, evening, every reading carefully recorded. During that time, despite taking 4 medications, his blood pressure rose from 136/82 to 132/88. Not because his disease progressed, but because of chronic sympathetic activation triggered by repeated checking. The danger is the psychological spiral. You see one high reading, you worry, you check again minutes later. The next reading is higher. Stress increases. The third reading climbs even more. Each measurement becomes a new sympathetic trigger. Some people keep their blood pressure elevated for 3 to 4 hours a day purely from excessive checking. Do this for months or years and your blood vessels begin to remodel. Vessel walls thicken, smooth muscle hypertrophies, baseline vascular tone increases. At that point, the blood pressure becomes truly high even when you are not measuring. When Robert stopped and measured once daily, sitting quietly for 5 minutes, no talking, no phone, his blood pressure dropped from 152/88 to 138/80 within 2 weeks. No medication change, no diet change. He simply stopped chronically activating his own sympathetic nervous system. I'll be direct, checking your blood pressure repeatedly does not make you safer. It makes your blood pressure higher and corrupts the data you're trying to collect. If you are checking more than twice a day, you are driving anxiety-induced hypertension. Stop. Measures correctly. Once a day is enough. In the previous part, I made this clear. Measuring blood pressure the wrong way can push your numbers up by itself, but there is another habit that is just as dangerous, because it distorts both your readings and the effectiveness of your medication. That habit is drinking coffee at the wrong time. You drink coffee every morning. Many people do, but if you check your blood pressure after drinking coffee or take your blood pressure medication with coffee, you are making a serious mistake. You are not measuring your baseline blood pressure, you are measuring the effect of caffeine. Caffeine is not harmless to your blood vessels. It blocks adenosine receptors, which NORDs allow blood vessels to relax. When adenosine is blocked, vessels cannot dilate and remain constricted. The result is a blood pressure increase of 10-15 mmHg from just 1 or 2 cups of coffee. The danger is timing. Caffeine is absorbed rapidly. Blood level peak at 30-60 minutes after ingestion. This is exactly when many people check their blood pressure in the morning. The number you see on the monitor at that moment is not your true blood pressure. It is pressure elevated by caffeine, but the mistake goes further. When you take blood pressure medication with coffee, you create direct pharmacologic opposition. The medication is trying to relax blood vessels. Caffeine is keeping them constricted. These forces cancel each other out. The result is that the medication loses about half of its effectiveness during the absorption and peak effect window. With calcium channel blockers, the conflict is even stronger. These drugs prevent calcium from entering vascular smooth muscle cells, stopping contraction. But caffeine increases intracellular calcium through a different pathway. You are pressing the brake and the accelerator at the same time. Margaret, 71, is a clear example. She drank 2 strong cups of coffee every morning, took her medication immediately afterward, and then checked her blood pressure. Her readings stayed around 148/86 despite taking 3 medications. When she changed just one thing, checking her blood pressure before coffee and taking medication with water, her blood pressure dropped to 132/78. No medication change, no dose change, only timing. I'll be direct, if you measure blood pressure after coffee, that data is wrong. If you take medication with coffee, you are weakening your treatment. This leads doctors to believe your hypertension is resistant and to increase medication unnecessarily. The rule is simple. Measure blood pressure for coffee. Take medication with water. Wait at least 30 minutes before drinking coffee. That one change removes a daily artificial blood pressure elevation. You can comment your age or leave the number 1 if this topic applies to you. Subscribe so you don't miss upcoming videos, and share this video if you found it truly helpful. In the previous part, I made one thing clear. There are factors that distort your blood pressure numbers without you realizing it. Now I'm going straight to a problem many people deny. You may not add salt, but you are still consuming too much sodium every single day. You don't use a salt shaker. You don't sprinkle salt on your food, yet your blood pressure stays high, not because your medication is weak, but because sodium is hidden in the foods you eat daily. Thomas, 69, is a perfect example. He never added salt to his meals, but a detailed analysis showed he was consuming 3,400 milligrams of sodium per day. His blood pressure stayed at 142/8 despite taking 2 medications. The problem wasn't the drugs, it was bread, deli meats, canned soup, and fast foods. The mechanism is simple and ruthless. Sodium pulls water into the bloodstream. More fluid in the same vascular system means higher pressure. This is physics, not opinion. Within 2-4 hours after a high-sodium meal, blood volume increases and blood pressure begins to rise. The real danger is the chronic effect. In people over 60, the body becomes salt-sensitive. Even when sodium intake is high, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system fails to suppress properly. The result is simultaneous fluid retention and vasoconstriction. These forces stack, driving blood pressure to levels medication struggles to control. It doesn't stop there. Excess sodium causes endothelial damage. Oxidative stress increases. Nitric oxide decreases. Blood vessels lose their natural ability to dilate. When vessels can't relax, blood pressure stays elevated all day, not just after meals. Remember this number: every extra 1,000 milligrams of sodium raises systolic blood pressure by 5-6 milligrams. If you're consuming 3,500 milligrams when you should be under 1,500 milligrams, you are adding 10-12 milligrams daily. No medication can overcome that. Hidden sodium isn't where you expect it. 3 ounces of deli meat can contain near 1,000 milligrams. A single slice of bread can have 200 milligrams at milligrams no egg game. One restaurant meal can exceed 2,500 milligrams. One meal can push you past an entire day limit. When Thomas eliminated deli meats, switched to fresh home-cooked proteins, chose low-sodium bread, and cut processed foods, his intake dropped to 1,700 milligrams per day. His blood pressure fell from 142/88 to 137/8 within 3 weeks. No medication changes, no dose increases, just removing the osmotic load from his blood vessels. I'll be direct. If you don't control hidden sodium, medication will always lose. When sodium intake drops, the kidneys clear excess within 48 hours, blood volume normalizes quickly, and vascular function begins to recover. Blood pressure falls noticeably within 1 to 2 weeks, not months. In the previous parts, I showed you behaviors that cancel out your medication. Now I'm going straight at a habit many people keep justifying: one drink every day. You tell yourself a glass of red wine at night is good for your heart. Your blood pressure disagrees. During the first 1-2 hours after drinking, alcohol causes mild vasodilatation. Blood pressure may drop to 4 mmHg. You feel relaxed. That's the trap. Be 8-12 hours later, as blood alcohol levels fall, the body rebounds. The sympathetic nervous system surges, norepinephrine rises, cortisol rises, blood vessels constrict more than they did at baseline, blood pressure spikes upward. This is rebound hypertension. If you drink every day, you never escape this rebound phase. You drink at night, your pressure rises in the morning. Day after day, your body is locked into a state of chronic sympathetic overactivation. Sarah, 74, drank 1 glass of red wine every night. Her blood pressure stayed at 142/84 despite taking 2 medications. When she eliminated alcohol completely for 30 days, her blood pressure dropped to 132/78, a 10 mmHg reduction from removing alcohol alone. No medication changes, no dose increases. But alcohol doesn't act through just one pathway. It also directly activates the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. Chronic alcohol intake increases renin release. Angiotensin II rises. Aldosterone rises. The result is simultaneous sodium retention and vasoconstriction. Blood pressure is pushed up from 2 directions at once, even when you don't feel stressed. It doesn't stop there. Alcohol causes endothelial inflammation and oxidative stress. Nitric oxide production falls, blood vessels lose their ability to dilate NORT. Vessel walls stiffen. When vessels can't relax, blood pressure stays elevated all day, not just after drinking. The data is clear. 1 drink per day raises blood pressure by 5-8 mmHg, 2 drinks per day rate at 8-12 mmHg, 3 drinks per day rate at 12-15 mmHg. It doesn't matter whether it's wine, beer, or spirits. Ethanol is ethanol. The polyphenols in red wine do not offset the hypertensive effect of alcohol. I'll be blunt. Daily alcohol and blood pressure control cannot coexist. Your medication tries to lower pressure. Alcohol pushes its back up every morning. At a tug of war, the medication always loses. When you eliminate alcohol completely for 4-8 weeks, sympathetic tone falls, vascular responsiveness improves, blood pressure drops measurably, and then does your medication start doing its job. In the previous parts, I showed you behaviors that directly oppose blood pressure medication. Now I'm going straight at a habit many people think is harmless. Daily exposure to stressful news. Your brain cannot tell the difference between news and real danger. Every alarming headline, every crime story, every violent image is processed in a threat. Instantly, the amygdala activates your survival response. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis switches on. The hypothalamus releases CRH. The pituitary releases ACTH. The adrenal glands release cortisol. At the same time, the brainstem increases norepinephrine output. The sympathetic nervous system takes over. Blood vessels constrict, heart rate rises, blood pressure begins to climb. Each time you consume stressful news, cortisol stays elevated for 30-60 minutes. If this happens multiple times a day, cortisol never returns to baseline. You live in a state of chronic physiological stress without realizing it. Cortisol doesn't just make you feel tense, raises blood pressure through multiple pathways at once. It increases hepatic production of angiotensinogen, leading to higher angiotensin II levels. It makes blood vessels more sensitive to constriction. It reduces nitric oxide, removing normal vasodiode. It increases sodium retention in the kidneys. Each mechanism alone raises blood pressure. Together, they keep it elevated all day. At the same time, norepinephrine causes vasoconstriction through alpha-1 receptors and increases heart rate. Real-time measurements show that just 5 minutes of watching negative news can raise blood pressure by 8-12 mmHg, with the elevation lasting 30-60 minutes afterward. If you watch the news in the morning, listen to true crime content during walks, check headlines throughout the day, and watch evening news before bed, your blood pressure stays high for hours every day. David, 66, is a clear example. He read news every morning, listened to true crime podcasts while walking, and watched news at night. His blood pressure stayed at 146/88 despite taking 2 medications. When he limited news exposure to 5 minutes per day and eliminated stressful content, his blood pressure dropped to 134/76 within 2 weeks. No medication changes, no dose increases. He simply turned off the cortisol trigger. Over time, chronic cortisol and catecholamine exposure remodel blood vessels. Vessel walls thicken, endothelial function deteriorates. Baseline blood pressure becomes truly high even when you are not watching the news. I'll be blunt, you cannot control blood pressure if your brain is constantly kept in a state of danger. Medication cannot overcome chronic cortisol activation. The solution is clear. Limit news consumption to a maximum of 5 minutes per day. Not their thing in the morning, not before bed. Eliminate stress-inducing content. When you do this correctly, cortisol levels fall within days, blood vessels begin to relax, and blood pressure drops noticeably within 1 to 2 weeks. In the previous parts, I showed you factors that raise your blood pressure without you realizing it. Now I'm going straight at a habit you repeat 3 times every day, and almost no one warns you about it: eating too fast and not chewing enough. You think fast eating only affects digestion. That rock. It directly disrupts the nervous system that controls your blood pressure. Under normal conditions, when you eat slowly and chew thoroughly, mechanical receptors in the jaw and chewing muscles are activated. These signals travel to the brainstem and activate the vagus nerve. The parasympathetic system takes over. Heart rate slows, blood vessels relax, blood pressure drops naturally during and after the meal. This is a built-in protective mechanism. When you rush your meals, that mechanism never fully activates. Instead, large, poorly chewed food and swallowed air cause rapid stomach distension. Stretch receptors in the stomach send signals to the brain that activate sympathetic control centers. Norepinephrine rises. Blood vessels constrict, blood pressure rises immediately after eating. James, 70, finished breakfast in 5 minutes, lunch in 8, and dinner in 12. His blood pressure stayed at 144 mmHg despite taking 3 medications, and it spiked after meals. Not because his condition worsened, but because every meal triggered sympathetic activation. The danger if frequency: you eat 3 meals a day. If you eat fast, you create 3 blood pressure spikes every day, 21 per week. At the same time, you miss 21 opportunities to activate the parasympathetic system, which would hold lower pressure. Over time, your nervous system adapts to sympathetic dominance. Baseline blood pressure becomes truly elevated. Large population studies show that people who finish meals in under 10 minutes have average blood pressure about 11 mmHg higher, and a 2.3-fold higher risk of hypertension compared to those who take 20-30 minutes per meal. This isn't an opinion, it's data. When James changed just one thing, chewing about 2-5 times per bite and making each meal last at least 20 minutes, his blood pressure dropped from 144 mmHg to 136/80 within 2 weeks. His post-meal spikes disappeared. No medication changes, no dose increases. I'll be blunt, fast eating destroys autonomic balance. Medication can't fix this, but you can. If you want your blood pressure to fall, turn every meal into a parasympathetic activation event, not a sympathetic hit. Eat slowly, chew thoroughly. This is real cardiovascular intervention, not lifestyle advice. In the previous parts, I showed you how each habit alone can raise blood pressure, but what matters most is this. They don't act in isolation. They stack. And that cumulative effect is why your blood pressure stays high despite multiple medications. Robert is the clearest example. At the start, his blood pressure was 152/88 while taking 4 medications. Not because the drugs were weak, but because 6 different physiological forces were pulling his blood pressure upward at the same time. Checking blood pressure too often created anticipatory anxiety, chronically activating the sympathetic nervous system. That alone added about 8 mmHg. Drinking coffee at the wrong time and taking medication with coffee caused pharmacologic opposition, producing false readings and weakening drug effects. Another 8 mmHg. Hidden sodium from processed foods increased blood volume and vascular tone, contributing about 10 mmHg daily. Alcohol created rebound hypertension, adding around 6 mmHg, especially in the morning. Stress news exposure maintained chronic cortisol elevation, making vessels hypersensitive to constriction, another 10 mmHg. Fast eating eliminated parasympathetic activation and created 21 sympathetic triggers per week, adding about 8 mmHg individually. These numbers may not alarm you. Together, they easily exceed 40-50 mmHg of systolic pressure. No medication can overcome 6 opposing forces at once. When Robert eliminated all 6 habits over 3 months, the result was unmistakable. His blood pressure dropped from 152/88 to 176. More importantly, he went from 4 medications down to 1 with better control than before. This was not an isolated case. Margaret, Thomas, Sarah, David, and James all showed similar patterns. Each removed different habits, but the outcome was consistent. 25-40 mmHg reductions within weeks, not years. Here is the key point. Medications are not failing. What is failing them are daily behaviors that directly oppose their mechanisms. When you remove sympathetic triggers, reduce blood volume, restore endothelial function, and rebalance the autonomic nervous system, the medication finally gets to do its job. You don't need to change everything in one day. Do this step by step, one habit per week. Within 6 weeks, blood pressure drops become measurable, not because of luck, but because you stopped attacking your own cardiovascular system. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to subscribe to continue receiving future videos. Every subscription helps motivate me to keep sharing valuable information. Please consider sharing this video. There's a good chance it could help a family member or a friend.